I'm not suggesting Queen Camilla lacks authority, but that tiara isn't hers. It rightfully belongs to Catherine, the Princess of Wales, for the Christmas gala at Buckingham,
The monarchy did not tremble because of a crown. It trembled because of a key. When Princess Anne confirmed that Catherine had been chosen as the new keeper of the crown jewels vault, the announcement landed like a silent thunderclap through every gilded room of the palace. This was not a ceremonial title. It was trust made visible, power made personal, and a message no one could misunderstand. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne made the confirmation through a recorded palace briefing prepared for senior household officials, and her voice carried none of the softness people expected from a family matter. The crown jewels vault, the guarded place where the monarchy's most sacred crowns, tiaras, and historic jewels are kept, had always represented more than beauty. It held memory. It held duty. It held the quiet proof that the crown belonged not to one person's desire, but to the survival of the institution itself. Catherine stood in a private palace room when the news reached her, and for a moment she did not speak. The princess understood exactly why the appointment mattered. This was not about touching diamonds or inspecting tiaras. This was about being trusted with the symbols that outlived kings, queens, feuds, and scandals. Anne watched her closely, not like someone offering comfort, but like someone measuring strength. The older royal knew that Catherine's stillness was not weakness. It was discipline. A senior aide placed the old access protocol on the table, then slid it away with careful hands. The aide returned with a sealed order bearing Catherine's name, and that small exchange changed the room more than any speech could have done. An access protocol simply means the written rules deciding who can enter restricted royal spaces and under what authority. Until that moment, those rules had belonged to a quieter system of rank, habit, and assumption. Now they had been rewritten with purpose. Camilla was not in the room. Her absence spoke before anyone dared mention her name. The queen consort had expected to remain close to every symbol of royal power, especially the jewels that carried centuries of female authority. Yet Anne's confirmation placed Catherine at the center instead, and Camilla's silence outside the room became as powerful as the words spoken inside it. She had not been asked to witness the decision. She had been made to feel its consequence. William received the update privately, away from the main briefing, and his reaction revealed more than he said. The prince lowered his eyes, breathed once, and asked only one question. Has Catherine been told everything? That was when the palace understood that this appointment was not sudden. William had seen it coming. Anne had prepared it carefully. And Catherine, whether ready or not, had just been handed a key that could unlock the monarchy's next great rupture. But before the palace could understand what Catherine had gained, it had to face what Anne had taken away from everyone else. Behind the announcement stood 3 women, each carrying a different kind of power. Princess Anne had the authority of loyalty earned over decades. Catherine had the quiet discipline of someone being pulled closer to the crown's center. Camilla had the wound of exclusion, the kind that does not need shouting to be devastating. And between them sat the vault, cold, locked, and suddenly political. Anne understood tradition in a way few inside the palace dared to challenge. To her, tradition was not decoration, not ceremony, not polished words placed around a difficult decision. It was duty, guarded by discipline. The crown jewels vault meant the secure royal chamber, where crowns, tiaras, and historic jewels were protected for state use and family legacy. Whoever stood near that vault did not simply hold access. That person held trust. Catherine felt that truth pressing against her before anyone said it aloud. The princess had spent years learning how to smile through pressure, how to stand still when the world watched, how to carry pain without turning it into spectacle. Now her new role placed her beside the monarchy's most sacred symbols, before she had even become queen. It made her a guardian of legacy, and that mattered because the crown needed someone who could protect history without using it for personal victory. William listened when Catherine finally admitted what the appointment had done to her heart. She told him quietly that she felt honored but unsettled. The vault did not feel like privilege. It felt like judgment. The prince did not rush to comfort her. He knew Catherine was not frightened of jewels, titles, or ceremony. She was frightened of what the decision said about the family around her. If Anne had chosen her, then someone else had been found wanting. Camilla heard the confirmation from an aide, not from Charles, not from Anne, and not from Catherine. That detail cut deeper than the order itself. The queen consort paused mid-step, gripped the back of a chair, and asked why she had not been told directly. Her voice stayed calm, but the calm was brittle. She understood the meaning at once. Catherine had not only been trusted, Camilla had been kept outside the room where that trust was declared. Anne's recorded wording made the wound sharper. She referred to a pattern of conduct that made Catherine the only acceptable choice, and those words moved through the palace like a locked drawer being opened. A pattern meant more than one mistake. Conduct meant behavior watched over time. Anne did not accuse Camilla by name, but the queen consort felt the direction of every sentence. She knew when silence was being used as a blade. Charles did not reverse the appointment. The king's silence became its own royal seal, because when he refused to undo Anne's confirmation, he showed everyone that the decision had approval from the highest level. He had the power to stop it. He chose not to, and that choice mattered, because it placed Catherine's discipline above Camilla's expectation, and duty above personal comfort. Camilla requested a private explanation before the day was over. Anne accepted. Catherine waited. William watched, and Charles remained painfully quiet. The palace understood then that the announcement had only been the first crack. The real break was coming next, because the true reason for Anne's decision was not found in the appointment itself, but in the hidden incident that forced the family to choose sides. Every palace crisis has a moment that people later pretend they did not see coming. For this one, it was not a public speech or a balcony appearance. It was a locked room, a missing ledger, and a late-night ceremony rehearsal that suddenly turned cold. From that night forward, Princess Anne stopped treating the vault as a tradition and began treating it as a line of defense. Anne had entered the archive expecting order, not discovery. The Sapphire Ledger incident, as it later became known inside the palace, meant the night a confidential jewel access record briefly vanished during a private state ceremony rehearsal. That ledger was not an ordinary book. It recorded heirloom movements, ceremonial permissions, and old custody markings tied to royal women across generations. In simple terms, it showed which jewels had been used, who had requested them, and which royal line each piece symbolically belonged to. Catherine was present that evening, and she understood the danger before others did. The princess saw Anne stop near the archive slot, saw her hand pause, saw her face harden in a way that made the room fall quiet. This was not a misplaced paper. This was not palace confusion. The empty space looked deliberate, and that mattered, because the vault's strength depended on one thing above all else: trust. Once trust cracked, every jewel became a question. Anne did not shout. She began retracing the custody chain with cold precision, asking who had entered, who had signed, who had requested clarification. Catherine stayed beside her and helped rebuild the timeline, while others turned nervous and defensive. The princess did not accuse anyone. She did something more powerful. She remained steady. Anne noticed that. Catherine did not chase blame, and she did not perform innocence. She protected the process. A palace steward later gave a documented account to the Internal Household Review, saying he had seen a restricted drawer left open shortly after Camilla's staff requested clarification on vault protocol. The steward did not accuse the queen consort directly, but the timing carried weight. Camilla's name entered the room without Camilla being there, and Anne understood how dangerous that was. A royal household can survive anger. It cannot survive suspicion moving freely through locked doors. The ledger returned hours later, but it did not return untouched. Anne opened it carefully and saw one page folded differently from the rest. That one crease changed everything. It suggested someone had searched for a specific jewel record, not browsed by accident. Catherine saw Anne's expression shift, and the princess knew the older royal had reached a private conclusion. Rank could no longer be enough. Proximity could no longer be enough. Anne made her decision that night, long before the palace announcement. Catherine became the name she could not ignore, because Catherine had shown discipline when everyone else showed fear. And that secret trigger stayed buried until the day Camilla demanded answers face to face, and the palace finally ran out of silence. Camilla did not enter the room like someone asking a question. She entered like someone who already knew she had been wounded. Anne stood near the table. Catherine remained beside the window, and for several seconds no one spoke. The silence was more brutal than accusation. Then Camilla asked the one thing everyone had been avoiding. Why Catherine? And why now? Anne did not flinch. The private palace sitting room had been chosen because no public audience could soften what needed to be said. A private sitting room simply means a family room inside the royal residence, away from cameras, staff movement, and formal ceremony. That mattered because this was no longer about image, it was about trust. Camilla wanted an explanation as a woman who believed her rank had been ignored. Anne prepared to answer as a royal who believed rank had become the problem. Camilla looked directly at Anne and said the exclusion felt like humiliation. The queen consort did not shout, but every word carried injury. She believed her position beside Charles should have guaranteed direct involvement in anything tied to royal jewels and ceremonial access. Ceremonial access means permission to use historic royal items for official events, state occasions, and family duties. To Camilla, being left outside that process felt like being left outside power itself. Anne answered without apology. She told Camilla that the vault required restraint, not entitlement. The words landed hard. Catherine stayed quiet, but her hands tightened when the queen consort suggested the appointment had been designed to embarrass her. The princess had not asked for this fight. She had not chased the role. Yet Camilla's pain turned toward Catherine, as if the younger woman had personally taken something that belonged to her. Anne then revealed, through a documented internal review prepared after the late-night rehearsal, that the Sapphire Ledger incident had changed the palace's trust structure permanently. The incident meant the night a confidential jewel access record disappeared and returned with one page disturbed. That mattered because the ledger did not just list jewels. It carried custody history, permissions, and the quiet map of who could stand close to the monarchy's most sacred symbols. Camilla denied wrongdoing at once. She said no order had come from her, no instruction had been given, and no page had been touched by her hand. But after the ledger was mentioned, her silence stretched too long. The queen consort looked away for just a moment, and that moment changed the air in the room. Anne saw it. Catherine felt it. Even without an accusation, the silence made the room smaller. Catherine finally spoke, and her voice was calm but wounded. She told Camilla that she had no wish to turn the vault into a battlefield. The princess said the appointment frightened her because it placed duty between women who should have stood together. Camilla heard the softness, but she could not accept it. The queen consort saw Catherine's restraint as victory dressed as innocence, and that made the wound deeper. Anne ended the confrontation with a final sentence that left no room for retreat. She said the next keeper had to be chosen by conduct, not comfort. The word conduct struck Camilla like a verdict. The queen consort stepped back, and for the first time, she looked less angry than shaken. Catherine remained still. Anne remained firm, And somewhere beyond that closed door, Charles was summoned. Charles would now have to face what everyone else had only circled. The king could protect Camilla's pride, or he could protect Anne's decision. He could reverse the appointment, or he could let Catherine stand where trust had placed her. But when the monarch finally faced the choice, it became clear that the crown's power no longer belonged only to the person wearing it. Charles did not need to raise his voice to change the future. The file was placed before him, the appointment order already prepared, the palace waiting for either confirmation or retreat. He read Anne's recommendation once, then again. When he finally set down the pen without signing a reversal, everyone understood. The king had allowed the decision to stand, and Camilla had been overruled by silence. Charles looked older in that moment, not because of age, but because every private choice had finally become heavy. The vault appointment order meant the written command naming Catherine as keeper of the crown jewels vault, the person trusted to oversee access to the royal family's most guarded jewels. Anne's confirmation note sat beside it, calm and sharp, explaining why Catherine's discipline had become impossible to ignore. The revised access protocol named the princess directly, and that mattered, because rules once shaped by habit were now shaped by trust. William stood nearby and watched his father read. The prince understood what Charles was facing. Supporting Anne meant protecting the vault, but it also meant deepening Camilla's isolation. Rejecting Anne would spare the queen consort's pride, but it would weaken the very system meant to guard the crown's sacred symbols. The king knew both truths, and neither offered mercy. He had spent a lifetime learning that power could wound the person closest to him. Charles finally spoke in a low voice, admitting through a recorded private council note that the royal household could not survive another custody dispute over heirlooms. A private council note means an internal written record of a serious royal decision, kept for senior household guidance rather than public display. His words mattered because heirlooms were not just ornaments. They carried family memory, public duty, and the dangerous question of who had the right to stand near history. William chose his words carefully. He told Charles that Catherine would protect the vault without turning it into a weapon. The prince did not say it to praise his wife. He said it because the monarchy needed someone who could hold power without enjoying another person's pain. Catherine's strength had always been quiet, and quiet strength was exactly what the vault now demanded. Charles closed his eyes for a moment, and the silence around him felt like surrender. The king knew Camilla would feel abandoned. He knew the queen consort would read his inaction as a choice against her. But he also knew Anne had not moved lightly. She had acted after the Ledger incident, after the confusion, after the pattern that could no longer be dismissed as misunderstanding. The sealed instruction made the decision final. It confirmed that Camilla's access would now require additional authorization when connected to certain historic jewels. That instruction did not strip the queen consort of dignity, but it did remove old assumptions. She could no longer move through the system simply because rank opened doors. Catherine's name now stood where informal privilege once lived. Charles pushed the file away without signing any reversal. William saw the choice settle across his father's face, and the prince understood that the crown had just drawn a painful line inside its own family. Anne's decision survived. Catherine's role held. Camilla's expectation broke. By morning, palace staff received the updated order. Quiet voices carried it from office to office, and every person who read it understood the same thing. Once the new protocol left the king's desk, the decision stopped being private pain and became palace reality. The cruelest consequences are not always announced. Sometimes they arrive as a pause at a doorway. Camilla approached the jewel archive corridor, expecting the old rhythm of palace life to continue. But the guard did not move. The aide did not smile. And when her request was checked against the new protocol, the queen consort understood that Anne's confirmation had changed more than Catherine's role. It had changed Camilla's place. Camilla held herself still, but the shock moved through her face before she could hide it. The updated vault protocol had quietly taken effect that morning, meaning the new written rules now required Catherine's oversight before certain historic jewels could be moved, examined, or prepared for ceremony. That mattered, because palace life runs on more than public titles. It runs on invisible permissions, old habits, and doors that open without anyone needing to ask. The aide checked the request again, almost afraid of what the answer would be. Staff members had been instructed to follow the order precisely, not gently, not loosely, not according to rank. That instruction changed everything inside the palace, because it forced every person near the vault to treat Catherine's authority as active, not symbolic. The queen consort had not lost her title, but in that corridor, title was not enough. Camilla looked at the guard, then at the aide, and disbelief slowly turned into humiliation. She had walked toward that restricted archive area, expecting the old respect to move ahead of her like a key. Instead, she met a rule with Catherine's name on it. The queen consort asked whether there had been a mistake. The aide did not answer quickly, and that pause hurt more than a refusal. Camilla understood the truth before anyone said it. Catherine learned what happened later, and triumph never touched her. The princess sat quietly as the details were explained, feeling the heavy discomfort of being placed above someone already wounded. She had accepted the role because Anne believed she could carry it, but now Catherine saw the first human cost. The vault was not simply protected. Camilla had been stopped, and the pain of that moment had Catherine's name attached to it. William received a separate warning from a palace aide through a private staff note, and the message was blunt. Several old access cards had been deactivated overnight. An access card is a security pass used by approved household members to move through restricted royal areas, and removing one means the person no longer has automatic permission. The prince read the note twice, knowing this was no small adjustment. This was the palace quietly rewriting its internal map. Anne personally checked the revised list before the day ended. She found one final informal privilege that had never been officially recorded, a quiet exception that allowed certain requests to bypass written approval. The Princess Royal removed it without hesitation. Anne knew informal privilege was exactly how trouble entered old institutions. If the rules were going to protect the vault, they had to protect it from softness, favoritism, and fear. Catherine felt the pressure closing around her. She did not want to become the face of Camilla's rejection, yet she could not pretend the system had not needed changing. The princess asked to speak with Anne alone, not as a complaint, but as a plea for clarity. She needed to know whether this role was protection or punishment. She needed to know whether she had been chosen to guard the crown, or to carry the blame for a decision others were afraid to own. Anne agreed without delay. William watched Catherine leave for that private conversation, and understood that something inside his wife had shifted. The appointment had already wounded Camilla, tested Charles, and tightened every corridor around the vault. Now it would test Catherine herself. And in that private conversation, the appointment finally stopped being a palace order and became a personal test. There were no aides in the room when Catherine finally asked the question. No files, no ceremony, no polished words for public memory. Only Anne, standing with the patience of someone who had survived a lifetime inside duty. And Catherine, carrying a role she had not chased, but could no longer refuse. The princess wanted reassurance. Instead, she received the truth. Catherine looked at Anne and asked whether the vault had become a weapon. The keeper of the crown jewels vault meant the trusted royal guardian overseeing access to the monarchy's most historic crowns, tiaras, and heirlooms. That role mattered because those jewels were not just expensive objects. They carried family history, public meaning, and the quiet power of who the monarchy trusted closest to its legacy. Catherine needed to know whether she had been chosen to protect that legacy or to stand as proof that Camilla had failed. Anne did not soften the answer at first. She told Catherine the vault was never about jewels alone. It was about protecting symbols from personal ambition. The Princess Royal had seen too many people mistake royal objects for personal prizes, and she understood how dangerous that could become. A crown could make a person feel chosen. A tiara could make a person feel entitled. A vault could become a battlefield if the wrong hands treated history like possession. Catherine admitted the fear she had carried since the announcement. She said she did not want to be remembered as the woman who pushed Camilla aside. The princess spoke carefully, but the pain was clear. She knew the queen consort had been wounded. She knew the palace corridors were already whispering. She knew every new rule would be read as Catherine rising, while Camilla fell. That contrast hurt her, because duty had placed her above someone who already felt excluded. Anne finally showed rare softness. She told Catherine that fear was exactly why she could be trusted. The Princess Royal explained that restraint had always been the monarchy's hardest form of power, because it demanded silence when pride wanted victory, and discipline when pain wanted revenge. Anne had not chosen Catherine because she wanted to punish Camilla. She had chosen her because Catherine understood the difference between guarding something and owning it. Anne then revealed, through the private notes she had written after the Sapphire Ledger incident, that Catherine had been her recommendation months before the public confirmation. The incident meant the night a confidential jewel record vanished and returned with one page disturbed. Anne remembered Catherine that evening, calm while others panicked, focused while others defended themselves, steady while suspicion moved through the room. That was the moment the older royal began to see the future differently. Catherine understood then that the appointment was not a reward for loyalty. It was recognition of pressure endured without performance. She had not been handed the vault because she was popular, graceful, or close to William. She had been chosen because when the palace shook, she did not turn fear into drama. She turned it into control. And inside a monarchy built on symbols, that kind of control was worth more than any jewel. Anne stepped closer and told Catherine that the crown did not need someone hungry near the vault. It needed someone careful. The princess absorbed those words, and something in her changed. The shock did not disappear, but it settled into resolve. She no longer looked like a woman trapped inside another person's decision. She looked like a guardian beginning to understand the weight of her own authority. Catherine left that room without apology. Anne watched her go, knowing the appointment had finally become more than an order on paper. It had become a personal vow. But while Catherine found her footing inside the palace, the world outside turned the appointment into a national spectacle. By sunrise, the story was no longer confined to palace corridors. The appointment had escaped into headlines, breakfast broadcasts, and crowds pressed against royal gates. People did not speak only about jewels. They spoke about trust. They spoke about Camilla's humiliation, Anne's steel, and Catherine's rise. A private decision had become a public symbol, and Britain understood the meaning before anyone explained it. Catherine woke to a country already discussing her name. The princess had not given an interview, had not made a statement, and had not tried to defend herself. Still, every screen seemed to place her at the center of the monarchy's future. Media coverage framed her new role as one of the strongest signs yet that she was being prepared for deeper royal responsibility. That mattered, because the vault was not a soft position. It was a trust position, and trust inside the royal family had suddenly become the loudest story in Britain. Palace sources issued a brief statement through the communications office, saying the appointment reflected continuity, duty, and the careful preservation of royal heritage. Royal heritage means the traditions, objects, records, and symbols passed through the monarchy across generations. The statement sounded calm, but its meaning was sharp. The palace was not denying the shift. It was making the shift sound permanent. Catherine had not simply stepped into a room. She had stepped into a role the public now understood as preparation. Camilla saw the front pages at breakfast, and the silence around her became unbearable. The queen consort picked up one newspaper, read the headline, then folded it in half with slow, controlled hands. She did not argue. She did not ask for Charles. She simply left the table. That small act carried the pain of someone who knew the country had noticed her exclusion. Camilla could survive private disappointment. Public humiliation was different. William watched Catherine absorb the attention, and he saw how carefully she held herself. The prince reminded her that dignity would matter more than explanation. He knew the public wanted drama, but Catherine could not feed it. She had to stand still while people turned her trust into triumph, and Camilla's pain into spectacle. William understood the danger. Success could look cruel if Catherine allowed even one shadow of pride to show. One newspaper front page captured the entire storm. It showed a close image of a royal vault key beneath the headline, "Catherine trusted with the crown's treasures." The image spread quickly, because it turned a hidden palace order into one simple message. The key meant access. The treasures meant history. Catherine's name above them meant the monarchy had chosen its future guardian, and everyone could see who had not been chosen. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates, speaking in low voices as broadcasters repeated the story. Buckingham Palace is the central London royal residence often used for official monarchy business and public moments, so any crowd there instantly gave the appointment national weight. One woman told a broadcaster, "It feels like the future just arrived early." That sentence traveled faster than the palace statement, because it said what many were thinking. Catherine's rise no longer felt distant. Anne heard the public reaction through a recorded briefing summary and showed no surprise. The Princess Royal had known the country would understand the symbolism faster than the courtiers did. She had not chosen Catherine for popularity, but popularity now protected the choice. Anne also knew the cost. Camilla would feel cornered, Charles would feel exposed, and Catherine would feel watched from every side. The palace moved from damage control to acceptance before the day ended. Staff stopped treating the appointment like a sensitive leak and began treating it like royal fact. Catherine remained quiet. William remained close. Camilla remained wounded. Anne remained certain. And when the noise faded, one truth remained inside the monarchy. The vault had not merely been assigned, it had chosen its guardian. In the end, the appointment was not about diamonds, sapphires, tiaras, or keys. It was about who the monarchy believed could stand closest to history without trying to possess it. Princess Anne's confirmation placed Catherine at the center of royal trust, but it also exposed the cost of that trust. Camilla was wounded, Charles was tested, William was steadied, and Catherine was changed forever. Catherine's role as keeper became the emotional proof that the monarchy was preparing her for more than visibility. The keeper of the crown jewels vault meant the trusted royal guardian given oversight of access to the monarchy's most historic jewels and sacred heirlooms. That mattered because visibility can be managed, but guardianship must be earned. Catherine was no longer only being watched as the future queen. She was being trusted as a protector of royal memory. Anne's confirmation was remembered as a decisive act because it placed duty above comfort. The Princess Royal had not chosen the easiest path, and she had not chosen the quietest one. She had chosen preservation above personal politics. That mattered because the palace could survive embarrassment, but it could not survive confusion around its most sacred symbols. Anne understood that the crown's power depended on clear trust, not soft compromise. Camilla sat alone after the palace settled, not defeated entirely, but forced to accept a truth she could no longer escape. The queen consort still had rank, she still had position, she still had Charles beside her in name and duty. But certain doors now opened through Catherine, and that changed the feeling of power. Camilla had learned that title could place a person near the crown, but it could not guarantee access to every part of its soul. Catherine stood beside William later that evening and admitted that the role had made her stronger and more exposed at the same time. The princess knew people would now study her silence, her choices, and every jewel connected to her name. The prince reminded her that strength did not mean comfort. It meant carrying pressure without letting pressure harden the heart. Catherine listened, and for once, she did not look overwhelmed. She looked steady. Charles privately accepted, through a confidential household record, that the decision had prevented a larger rupture over jewels, records, and symbolic authority. The king knew the pain it caused Camilla, but he also knew what might have happened if the old confusion continued. A confidential household record means an internal palace document used to preserve the reasoning behind sensitive decisions. Charles did not celebrate the outcome. He simply understood it had been necessary. Anne gave Catherine the final words that made the verdict unmistakable. The Princess Royal told her the vault was never meant for the most powerful person, but for the most disciplined one. Catherine received those words without pride. Anne saw that, and it confirmed everything. The princess had not taken the vault. She had been trusted with it. The monarchy emerged bruised but clearer. Catherine became the guardian of royal memory. Camilla learned the limits of title. Charles accepted the cost of authority. William stood beside the woman now carrying one of the crown's quietest burdens. Anne proved that duty still commanded the palace when comfort failed. And the crown chose trust over entitlement. This was the moment the jewels stopped being ornaments and became a verdict. Catherine had not taken the vault. She had been trusted with the soul of the crown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.